Hi guys, I'm Jack Wong and welcome to the channel. As a 3D printing hobbyist, we bet you might have seen different types of filament materials in the market. Have you ever wondered why are those materials even exist and for what purpose does each of the filament material difference for? Well, in today's video, we will briefly explain the properties of some commonly seen filaments materials, usage as well as tips for printing them. We will also list out the extruder and heat bed temperature range in the descriptions of this video. Be sure to like and subscribe us for more contents like this. The first filament material to be discussed is the commonly used PLA filament. This is the most recommended material for beginners to start printing with. There are a lot of advantages to print using this kind of material. Firstly, settings to achieve better quality PLA print are easy to tune. Because PLA is very forgiving of variations in temperature and printing speed, chances of getting print failures like warping and stringing are small. Next, the properties of PLA allow precise filament extrusions, thus having good dimensional accuracy in the printed part. Moreover, since PLA is derived from crops such as corn or sugarcane, its biodegradable properties make it eco-friendly. PLA also provides variety of textures such as wood texture, marble texture, and silk texture. Thus, you can achieve more printing effect using PLA materials. Moving on to the disadvantages of this material. Some disadvantages are such as slightly weaker in strength and low melting point. Printed part might melt or soften upon heat exposure such as under hot sun for a long period of time. Here are some tips for printing with PLA filament. During your printing, make sure that you have enabled cooling fan at 100% speed after the first layer. Without a cooling fan, you will end up with terrible print quality as the materials might not cool fast enough during the printing. Also, set higher minimum layer cooling time to ensure small parts are being printed with sufficient cooling time. Next, it is not necessary to require a heat bed for printing PLA. Some homemade printers might not have heat bed, so PLA is a kind of materials that you can print with. Smoothing the surface of PLA can be done by sanding using sandpaper. Always keep the filament back into a sealed bag or enclosed box after the usage. This can prevent the filament spoiling through moisture absorptions from the surroundings. A PETG material is basically a stronger version of PLA. Its benefit is such as tough, great temperature resistance, and high impact resistance compared to PLA. The main disadvantage, however, is that it is slightly more challenging to fine-tune for the print settings compared to PLA. Without proper tuning, it will have higher tendency to crack and form stringing. One great tip is to try to find your best tuning through repetitive experiment before printing your project with PETG materials. Another tip is to use removable agents such as glue stick or hairspray on the heat bed while printing with PETG. This is because PETG can sometimes stick hardly on your printing bed, causing you some problem or even damage your heat bed while removing it. By printing on the removable agent, the part can come off with the agent and not with the bits and pieces of your heated bed surface. The next material we will be talking about is the ABS. The main benefits are higher strength and higher melting point compared to PLA. Parts that needs to withstand higher temperatures such as car interior decorations or extruder fan holder can be printed and works well with ABS. It also has greater resistance to moisture compared to PLA, nylon, and PVA. If you try to mod your 3D printer with custom printed parts, our suggestion is to print those parts using ABS too. A stronger and more durable printed accessories will give you a greater experience in operating the printer later. On the other hand, we will also mention some disadvantages of 3D printing using ABS. One of the disadvantages is that you will need to print it in an enclosed box. This is because the material is strongly sensitive towards surrounding temperature changes. Without stable ambient temperature, your ABS printing will face serious adhesion and warping problems. The materials also release strong audio fumes, which can cause bad health if you are printing inside a closed room. Make sure that proper ventilation is available for your printing studio while printing with ABS. One printing tips for printing ABS is that you can achieve an extremely smooth surface where layer lines can be literally invisible. This can be done by post-processing the printed part using acetone vapor smoothing. Also, if you are facing adhesion problem, you can apply ABS slurry on the heat bed prior to the printing. This is extremely helpful on getting a perfect ABS first layer. We will put a link under the description on how to prepare the ABS slurry. Be sure to check it out too. Coming up next is the HIPS material, stands for High Impact Polystyrene. HIPS properties are almost similar as the ABS. However, one special property that ABS do not have is the ability of it to dissolve in D-limonene chemical solution. With this special property, it is often being used as support material for ABS printed parts with a dual extruder printer type. This can greatly reduce the risk of damaging the desired printed part while removing the printing supports. This works extremely well for very complex printed parts or printed parts with small details. The disadvantages of this material is that it might require extra cost for buying the dissolving materials, and you will need a dual extruder printer to print it as a support. One tips we can provide while printing HIPS as a supportive material is that you can manually remove some big parts of the supports and only dissolve those which are not accessible by your tools. This can greatly increase the efficiency of the support removal and saves you some amount of the chemical used. HIPS do release odor during the printing, but is slightly less pungent compared to ABS. Thus, you can use it to replace the usage of ABS. But please be extra careful that your part cannot be exposed to chemicals such as lemonade waters, as it will slowly dissolve. Well, the next material is another support material, PVA. The main advantage of this material is its high sensitivity towards moisture. Due to this property, it can easily dissolve in water, thus it is used as support material in dual extruders printer for different types of materials such as PLA, ABS or PETG. Unlike HIPS, it does not require any special chemical to dissolve, thus it will be easier to use as dissolvable supports. The main disadvantage is that if the material is left hot in the extruders, it will easily clog the nozzles. Thus, it is advisable to cool down the extruder when it is not extruding during the printing. Another disadvantage is that it is a comparatively expensive filament to get from the market. Thus, the cost of printing can be increased. Here are some tips for printing this material. Set the support separation distance to 0 layer for better surface finishing. This way, when the support materials are being dissolved completely, it will leave the printed part with extremely good surface finishing. Also, open environment will easily damage the filament. Thus, keep this filament sealed properly in an airtight container once we are finished with the printing. Nylon is another material we would like to talk about. It has advantages such as high toughness, high durability, strong mechanical strength, and less deformation. Due to these properties, nylon does not snap or break easily, possesses extreme impact resistant property, and can generate sturdy parts that can resist shock. However, nylon is a very difficult to handle materials for beginners in 3D printing. Not only does it have terrible stringing problem without proper tuning, but it also reacts strongly with the moisture around the surrounding, causing wet filament. One advice is to bake the filaments for sometimes using filament dehydrator before printing it. A dehydrator is also needed to be continuously active during the printing process for better printing experience. The last materials that we would like to talk about today is the TPU. TPU is a very common form of elastic polymer that is being used in 3D printing platform. Compared to other type of flexible 3D printing materials, TPU is slightly more rigid, making it easier to extrude and print with. Other benefits are such as high flexibility and durability. Thus, it can withstand much higher compression and tensile forces compared to PLA and ABS. You can bend and twist the printed part, which most of other printing materials cannot. The main disadvantage is that it needs to be printed extremely slow, which will cause the printing time to be extremely long. One tip to print with this type of filament is that it is always advisable to print this material using direct drive extruder. You can use a Bowden extruder to print this material too, but that will require more intensive tuning in terms of printing speeds. To sum all up, if you are looking for a beginner-friendly filament, choose PLA. If you are looking for filaments that does not release pungent smells or relatively safer to print indoor, choose PLA. If you are looking for a stronger material for your part, use ABS, Nylon or HIPS. If you wish to have slightly stronger materials but do not want to deal with too pungent smells, you can choose to print with PETG. If you wish to print yourself something elastic like phone cover or rubber toys, choose TPU. Before we end the video, we would like to mention that although we mentioned some filament types tend to be odorless during printing, but we do not recommend staying around all the time during the printing. There are no studies yet to prove that 3D printing with those filaments has zero effect on human body. So, to be safe, always keep your 3D printing in proper ventilated place. So, this is the end of the video. We hope that with this video, you have a better idea on how to choose the printing material based on your usage. And if you think that this video is helpful, please like, subscribe and share it to your friends. Your support will be our main motivation to make more videos like this. As always, thanks and happy printing!